Hello and welcome to the In Touch Show with Betfred. It's another really busy week of rugby league across all 4 Betfred leagues. I'm delighted to say this week's guest, Andrew Henderson, Warrington Wolves Assistant Coach and a commentator for OuRLeague with the RFL. You've been doing a lot of coverage of the Championship in League One. Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me, Lewis. I've been doing a lot of work here on behalf of the RFL for the Betfred Championship and League One seasons and covering some of the great stories and highlights and action that we've been entertained with. It's been a fantastic season so far. We're now in the playoff campaign at the moment, which again, there's still plenty of excitement to come, which I'm sure we'll discuss today.
And as you mentioned, plenty of stories, and we heard quite a few of those last night. It was the Betfred Championship and League One awards night.
Yep.
Really good do in Manchester, and just as ever, just I guess brought to light the amount of talent that's around in those two leagues.
Yeah, no, look, I thought last night's awards dinner was well presented. I thought the RFL did a great job. Betfred as major sponsors, I thought were excellent in terms of their support of the event, but also the support of the competitions throughout the season. And again, I think, like you said, we've been entertained this year in both competitions. There's been some great stories of teams emerging from nowhere. You know, you look at the York City Knights, where they've come from. They were in League One last year, come into the Championship this year, finished 3rd place. I would say were knocked out recently in the playoff campaigns, but that's a remarkable feat from that team. The Swinton Lions, another one, a very young side, not a lot of finance and resource behind it. You know, all of a sudden had a tough start to the league campaign, but then were one of the surprise packages come the back end of the Championship season. You've got the Toronto Wolfpack, you know, who have been a dominant force, you know, have managed to achieve back-to-back league leader shields for them. And then we look at the League One and Whitehaven, the story that they've been on, the journey they've been on to secure promotion back to the Championship. We've seen West Wales Raiders, who, you know, are a very new club in the essence of just starting up and have really struggled in the 2 seasons they've been in existence, but again made huge grounds this year in terms of they got their first ever professional win. They've reduced the deficit of their losses by over 50%, so they've shown improvement that way. The Coventry Bears, another one in the Midlands, had a really good start to the season, showed massive progress on and off the field. So I just think there's been so many good stories, but then we've also had some of the not so good ones where we've seen the Keighley Cougars in League One, the Widnes Vikings in the Championship, both start the season on minus 12 points as they've been into administration and having to face that adversity and come through it and actually manage to build a competitive squad and compete and have a reasonable season respectively is another flip side to the competition. But like I said, it's been a great season, so many good stories, some great talent has been unearthed in these competitions, and like you said, there's still very much an exciting finale to come. And
we'll touch on a few of the awards. A double on the night for York. You touched on York, Championship Club of the Year and Coach of the Year for James Ford, who, I mean, remarkably won the League One Coach of the Year in last season in that promotion year for them. Just how impressive is that job that him and that club have done? Yeah, look, I think it's been a great job on both fronts, and I think you could probably see that last night in the way the CEO John Flatman and the relationship he's got with James Ford. It clearly is a partnership. You know, there's clearly support there and a respect for one another, which I think is really important, Lewis, in any sort of professional organisation, that everybody's singing off the same hymn sheet. Everybody is focused on what the outcome is that they want to achieve, but they are working in tangent, side by side. They're aligned, is probably what I'm saying, to work to that common goal. And I think that was quite evident last night. Obviously James will have his kind of ethos and his principles in terms of how he wants his team to play and what his team represents. However, he needs a support from the CEO, the owner, the board of directors to be allowed to do that as well. And I see, some of the great things that the York Club are doing off the field. They've got a women's team up and running. They've got a big presence in the community there. They're now going to be moving into a new stadium next season at Huntington, state-of-the-art facility. They've got great training facilities. So as a club, the infrastructure and the foundations, from where they've come to where they are now, it's been a slow build, but
they're making real good progress each year. And like I said, James, obviously with the team, he's come in there. I mean, I know when he first took that job on, I think he had about 12 players in League One. He's had to build a team and scrimp and scratch from everywhere. He's got them playing competitively in League One. He's then got them promoted from League One to the Championship. He's been able to build upon that team, got a little bit more funds and support, grown it. I'm sure he'll get a little bit more next year to keep building it. But I just think that to be commended at York in terms of the way that they've made themselves sustainable as a club. They've got a clear vision and a plan to continue to grow at their pace. They're not getting ahead of themselves, and I think they've done it in a very pragmatic and realistic way. And hats off to them. They're doing some really good things for rugby league in and around the York area.
And a club that's really emerging. But we've seen throughout the season a lot of young players this year have really kind of stepped up the mark across the two leagues. At the League One Young Player of the Year, Andrew Bullman, and the Championship Young Player Matty Ashton, who's just had has come from nowhere really now. An unreal year. Yeah, no, look, well, obviously Matty Ashton will be joining the Warrington Wolves as of next season, so he's certainly an exciting prospect. And I remember Stuart Littler, the head coach, did tip me off about Matty early in the season. I passed that information on to Steve Price and Carl Fitzpatrick, and they've obviously monitored his progress through the season and obviously like what they see. I mean, the kid's undoubtedly got pace, and there's some people, they say there's no substitute for pace, but he's got pace, but he's also got a decent skill level too. Listen, he's got plenty more to work on in his game, and I'm sure he will evolve as a player as he continues to grow and develop. But that's the exciting thing. There's some great talent, as you rightly said there, Lewis, in both competitions. That as Super League clubs now, we are starting to look more at the Championship and the League One for this sort of talent, because just in terms of probably the game now, it's gone so big in Australia in terms of salary cap and whatnot. We're now looking more at homegrown talent as opposed to overseas talent. So I'm really hopeful that Matty Ashton's going to continue to grow and develop at Warrington and hopefully fulfil the potential that we see in him. But he's certainly got some pace to burn. He scored some scintillating tries throughout the Championship season this year. And like I said, mate, he certainly knows how to finish, that's for sure. And he'll have some decent colleagues in that wing department at Warrington next year.
Oh, absolutely. Well, the great thing with Matty, I mean, he's an outside back. Can play fullback, possibly on the wing as well. And but again, as you get to spend more time with him, we may be able to develop him into covering other positions as well. So, but the key for Matty is he's got a great opportunity now. But again, it's credit to the work that he's done previously at his previous clubs. He spent a little bit of time in Australia, in the country rugby league, and obviously he spent some time there. So it's credit to those clubs and coaches that have worked with him in the past to get into where he is now, and also the kid himself, because he's obviously shown a commitment and desire to improve and be the best he can be. And now he's going to get an opportunity to do that in a Super League environment. So hopefully we'll continue to see him grow on that path up. But as you said, Bullman as well for Whitehaven, another one who's actually been in some Super League systems as a youngster, hasn't quite worked for him, has then had to go back a step into League One. And that's what's great about some of the lower tier competitions, is it's a great breeding ground for some young talent coming through, but also sometimes for players who have been in systems as a youngster at the top, they get to come back. It actually becomes the making of them as players. They come back in here, they become more battle-hardened, they learn, they grow as people and become men. And then obviously, like you said, they develop in a different way. And who knows, someone like Andrew Bullman, he may find himself back in a Super League system in the future, but has had to go down to this route first to make that happen. But listen, it's exciting for the competition that we've got some of this young talent on show, as well as some of the older heads and stalwarts of the game still out there playing the Tried.
I mean, obviously, as you go up through the pyramid, there's a step up in speed and physicality and skills. But as a coaching unit, what are you looking at in these players at Championship and League One? Are the indicators that they have got the potential to do it at the highest level? Yeah, well, look, I think when you're coaching in the Championship, you're looking for commitment, really, because it's a big ask. A lot of the teams in the second and third tier of the British game are semi-professional. There are some full-time sides still in operation because they have that ambition to get promoted to the Super League, so they have a full-time operation to try and almost prepare themselves so that if and when the day comes, they're better equipped for that transition to go from the Championship to Super League. So, but for a lot of the coaches in these divisions, they are dealing with part-time players, semi-professionals. So the key ingredient for them is commitment, because these guys have got jobs.
they've got families, but they're also going to have to commit to a level of professionalism being a semi-professional. That's why it's semi-professional, not amateur, because there is an expectancy and a level of commitment required. So I think there's some of the key ingredients that the coaches would look for, that players who are obviously not only got talent in terms of their playing ability, but have got the commitment that they're willing to go and train 3 nights a week instead of 1 night a week and play on a Saturday. They're going to have 3 nights a week. They're going to play against decent teams, sometimes full-time teams as well in this division. So that'd be one of the key things for me, definitely commitment as well as having the talent. In terms of younger players being at this level to progress, then there's a little bit of education too, because I think some of the coaches in the division have had experience as players or coaches in the top flight before, and they can pass that knowledge onto these younger players of what is expected. You know what I mean? You may think you're doing everything as much as you can at the moment, but you can always be doing more. You know what I mean? And you're going to have to be fully committed to doing things away from the training ground as much as when you're here, to be able to make that transition and step up to the next level, or give yourself an opportunity to get into Super League.
And top award on the night, Championship Player of the Year, went to Gareth O'Brien. Yeah. We've seen Gareth.
Yeah, fantastic
Warrington
player. Fantastic player.
Super League, but he really has stood out this year, hasn't he, as a top player?
Yeah, and I think, it's a funny one, really. I think I've always liked Gareth O'Brien as a player, even when he was at Salford. Obviously, even when he came through Warrington, he was a young fella there. He went to Salford. I thought, I look at his journey and I felt that he developed at Salford well. He grew as a player there. I thought he was quite pivotal to a lot of the good stuff at Salford were throwing out at the time he was there. And then he's gone to Toronto, but I just think he's grown again. I think he's really matured as a player now, Lewis. And I look at the way he is. I think he's more consistent in terms of his decision making. I think the great thing about Gareth O'Brien is he's what you want in a modern day fullback. He runs really good lines out the back. He's a run threat. He's also, very good with the ball in hand. He makes really good decisions whether to play short, long. So his pass selection in decision making is good, and he also offers a kicking game as well as being able to defensively marshal his troops across the back and all those things. So I think he's got all the ingredients to be a really good Super League player, and there's a good chance that Toronto are going to be able to get promoted into the Super League next year. So Gareth will be back on that stage, but he's definitely a Super League player, that's for sure. But I think his journey coming back into the Championship, I think, is giving him a lot of confidence. It's probably the right word, and I think he'll be better for this experience being in the Betfred Championship before stepping back up to the Super League.
Toronto, obviously the front runners, the favourites to go and win the Championship final and go up. But I mean, how impressive do you think they've been? I mean, obviously a full-time team, a bigger budget than most in that league, but they've been consistently ruthless as well, haven't they?
They have.
They've done the job professionally.
Yeah, they have. I don't think they started the season as well as they would have liked to have. When I reflect back on when I look at them as a team at the start, they were winning, but they were winning ugly. They were a bit clunky. They weren't quite. They didn't have quite that cohesion or continuity within the team. And I think part of that reason too was the fact of a new coach coming in. Brian McDermott, obviously it was new to the club this year. So I think there was a little bit of that. People just trying to come to terms with Brian's style and methods, and obviously, and probably Brian too, just trying to figure out who he felt was going to be his best team come towards the business end. But I just think as the season's progressed, I think we've started to see them come together. And I think you rightly said there, shown a ruthlessness about their performances. I think they've been very clinical, very disciplined. They've had the odd performance where they've not probably been quite where they would like to be, but that's natural in a season. You're never going to be at 100% every week. But I think certainly this back end of the season, I just think they've really started to raise the bar. And I've been very, very impressed with them across the board. I just think they're playing really well as a team. And that's key. They're not just winning games, they're winning well. Like I said, they're executing their plays well. They're defending really well for each other. I think we saw that again in the recent semi-final against Toulouse when they beat them at the Lamport Stadium on the weekend. I thought they were very good. Probably a little bit disappointed they clocked off a little bit at the back end of the game and allowed a couple of soft tries at the back end from Toulouse just to make the scoreline a little bit more respectable. But I think for large parts of that game, they're well and truly in control and were excellent on the day.
Watching that game at the weekend, they reminded me, particularly in that first half, of it showed real signs of like a Brian McDermott team in playoff football when Leeds used to get to that stage of the year and find another gear, and it looked certainly for the first half against Toulouse at the weekend that's what Toronto were doing again. Just found just found more space really to move up the gears.
Yeah, I agree with that. Totally agree. I think they've timed their run well, mate. I think they're going to be very, very hard to beat from this point on now. I know they obviously will have the grand final at their place at home. Now, people will probably be talking about last year where they were superb in the Super 8s in the qualifiers. It was obviously a different structure last season of gaining promotion to Super League, and they came unstuck at the final hurdle. They were highly favoured to get the result against the London Broncos in that game. So they're going to be meeting another championship club this time round, but I don't think they're going to make that same mistake twice. I do think they will get promoted, Lewis. I do think that Toulouse are probably the only team, as much as Featherstone I think are playing outstandingly well at the moment. They've really hit some form and they're doing a really good job. I just feel that Toulouse for me have probably got the only arsenal to trouble them. I think, they play a very unpredictable style of rugby league, and if Toulouse can get on the front foot early against them, and a lot of their, flair and skill and I suppose inventiveness comes off early, it could put Toronto a little bit on the back foot and may just take Toronto to a place they've not been a lot this year, because that's one thing that most games Toronto have been in control of, haven't they? Or even when they've not won well, they've still won. They've still just done enough to win. And I don't know how many times they've been challenged this year. I know Toulouse beat them at their place mid-season comfortably. But apart from that, they've not had too many challenges. There's a couple early in the year in the wet weather where they were pushed to, I think Dewsbury almost had them at home in one game. But that was when, for me, they were still finding themselves as a team. They weren't quite where they needed to be. But since they found themselves now and they're playing really well, they've yet to be really challenged. So potentially could be the undoing of them in the final if a team does turn up and get a bit of early ascendancy in the game, which Toulouse are more than capable of doing if things come off for them. As you know yourself from watching them, they're a dangerous team in attack if things are clicking.
I mean, obviously Toulouse, Featherstone to find out who will go to Toronto in that final. I mean, Feather a really good. Talk about stories at the beginning of the show. Feather, another really good one. The way a new coach has come in, brought in a couple of the Aussie boys that have come in and just seem to have had a real kind of crack, but grown in throughout the year as well.
They have, mate, and it's funny with the Featherstone one because, like you said, they brought in Ryan Carr in, new coach. And the team they started with is certainly a lot different to the team they finished with. So there's actually not only been some wholesale change in the close season leading into this season, they've actually made some changes on the run through the year. I think they've had about probably 3 or 4 different halfback combinations, which, for any team, and you ask any coach, that's really difficult to manage. You generally want your pivotal players settled for most of the season. Now, obviously, as coaches, we are faced at times with injuries and things like that. You have to sometimes adapt and move people around to cover things. But, the reality with Featherstone, because they were linked with Leeds on the dual reg, they've had people coming and going in and out from them. Not always had the same players available each week for different reasons. Like I said, they brought in Dane Chisholm mid-season from Bradford. They had Tom Holmes on loan from Huddersfield at one point, but then he got called back, so then they had to go and find another halfback they had to bring in. They've now had Callum McLennan at the back end. They brought in this Connor Jones from Northern Pro. So they've had a lot of different sort of people in those sort of roles throughout the season. So that's full credit to the actual team and to the coaching team there, that they've managed to not lose their way. They've managed to maintain playing the way they've played. And again, as you said, the back end of this season, they've been incredible. And actually, for me, I think they have the potential to beat Toulouse over there this week. And I think they've got the ability to. But in saying that, I'm not sure Featherstone will have enough to trouble Toronto in the final. Whereas I think Toulouse, if they get to the final, I think they could cause Toronto problems.
I mean, if there's a way of watching Toulouse, if they're on TV or on the app, whatever, I always make sure that I watch it because they're such a fun rugby league team. So they are. They just seem to, Sylvain his teams just have the attitude of just get the football, throw it around, and and have a go. Yeah,
they do. They do, mate. It's the old French flair, isn't it? There's no shortage of wanting to attack. There's certainly very much an attacking ethos within that team, and that's obviously clearly brought down from the coach. He obviously wants his team to express themselves. His obviously mentality is when there's opportunity, you play to space. If there's opportunity and you see something, I'll back your creative instinct. He's got some great pivots there. Mark Corella, the fullback, Stan Robin, and Jonathan Ford, in the halves here. These guys are really good at off-the-cuff style. He's also got William Bartow too, the former Catalan London player, who for me is probably a little bit more of a steadier head. He kind of can play a little bit of structure as well as a little bit of off-the-cuff. But I think they've got a good balance to their pivotal players. And even at the nines there, Marion has been good, and Dean Parada has added a different dimension to them as well. So, they've got some really good threats here. But then they've got some great strike on the edges, Con Mika, and then they up front, Vai, Tyler Heppy have got a bit of offload. They love playing hot off the offload game, and that's what they're about. But like I said, it can sometimes be their undoing because they can make some mistakes off that. And at times, probably people have said, are Toulouse defensively good enough at this moment in time? That's the question mark for me over them. You can't question their attacking prowess, and when they're on song, they are on song. It's the defensive side of things. But when you look back at the start of the season, they had to grind some wins out, and that's something that I think Coach OuRLeague has spoke about, that they recognise that. Obviously where they train and play slightly different conditions to the English conditions, and he probably felt, when he reflected on the last 2 seasons leading into this year, they struggled in those earlier rounds in the wet conditions, that they couldn't adapt their game. So I think this year they have slightly adapted that to those conditions and had some gritty results. And as the tracks have firmed up, we've started to see the free-flowing, expansive play that we see from them.
How do you coach against a team when you know that everything's going to be off the cuff? Because you can do all the video in the world, but some of the players that they've got that are just going to do playoff instinct, that must be really difficult to sit down with your players and say, well, here's how we're going to run our systems. Yeah, no, look, they're a difficult team in terms of how you defend against them, because, like you said, that they can hit you. They hit you all over the field, and like I said, they'll hit, spin, offload. They'll move the point of attack. Hey, they'll chip over inside their own 20, 30. They'll kick on play 3. They do things really out the box and very unpredictable. So defensively it can be difficult in terms of things. The one key thing I found that when we played against Toulouse, it was you had to play methodical against them. So in some respects, you had to really complete high. You had to make sure you finished in corners. For me, was their back 3 are a big threat. So anytime you could put the ball in the touch, find the line, or put it up and literally hit them as they're catching it and finishing them corners to stop them, because they're very good at that. They're probably the team in that division that can score from the length of the field. Like the amount of times that Corella would catch a ball, link up with Mark on and put him away, or vice versa, you know what I mean? They'd catch it, they'd skim across the line, link up, and they get you, and they go 70, 80, 90 metres on you on play one, because they're willing to chance their arm. So the big thing for me was to try and put the ball into touch, or like you said, nullify that link-up threat, and then you had to really front-load energy defensively those early plays to stop any sort of go forward. But on top of that, it was important that you held the ball. You had to complete it over 85%. Because you give them, the more possession they've got, then the more opportunity they're going to strike and hit you. And that was kind of always the mentality I put into the teams. And unfortunately, during my time, I coached it against Toulouse, we never lost to them. Each time we played them, we beat them. So something worked there in terms of that sort of preparation for those games. And moving on to Betfred League One, Oldham securing their place. I did commentary on this game, of course, so I had a good look at them. They secured their place in the grand final in a couple of weeks, and I thought they looked a well-coached side, obviously, under Naylor. Some real talent as well in the halves. I thought Hugh had a really nice game as well. Yep. And I think they'll be confident, won't they, that whoever they come up against in that grand final, they'll be confident that they can go back up. I totally agree. And I think the way they played against Doncaster on the weekend, Lewis, I thought was playoff rugby. I thought they were very methodical in their process. They were simple, but they were effective. And probably what impressed me the most was they clearly had a game plan which was sharing the workload. They had their back 5 coming and doing a lot of the early carries. So that then gave the energy to the middle unit players to be able to front load defensively there. Their kicking game was clear, or their kick plan was very clear, that they were kicking to that left corner, putting it up, chasing hard, and just pinning Doncaster in that corner. And I think more often than not, Doncaster were really coming 5-10 metres off their own line, as opposed to Oldham, who were then catching the ball, play 1, play 2, 30, 35 off their line. So they definitely won the field position battle. They definitely won the possession battle. And I felt that
intensity and their attitude defensively. Like I said, they really front-loaded energy early plays, which forced Doncaster into a lot of errors. And it didn't allow Doncaster to move the ball. It was quite an interesting game because you had two teams that have got very contrasting styles. Oldham are very much down the middle third of the channel, like to play very tight down the middle, and like I said, we'll work off the back of a kick chase. They're not going to ask a lot of questions of you with the ball. They're not that type of team. Whereas Doncaster on the other side, well, actually, they'll move the ball. They'll move the point of attack. They'll shift it from left to right, right to left. They'll drop people under. They'll play a lot of different shapes. They'll ask a lot more questions. They've got some creativity and inventiveness there in the halves with Baharrel and Rangi Chase, and some real strike on the edges, Jason Tarley and Mariano, and so there's a lot of threat there in attack. But I just thought Oldham was, I just thought they were clinical and methodical in their performance, and if they can hold on to that mentality come grand final day, then I think you'll see them get promoted. But I'm sure Newcastle and Doncaster will want to have their say on that. But I thought I was very, very impressed, and I just do feel, I don't know what you felt, but I feel that they have got a mentality there that they want to get back to the championship. And I know that head coach Scott Naylor is leaving at the end of the season, regardless whether they stay up or go up or stay down. But I do think that group of players, there's a real hunger and ambition there because a lot of them have played in the championship before. Some of them will be new to them as well, but I think that I can feel it when you see them, that there's a real desire to get back to the championship. So I think that's their driving force at the moment.
And we'll move on to Newcastle Doncaster, but just a quick word on Workington, who'd lost to Newcastle the weekend. What a brave effort from them, considering the week from hell in terms of injuries and player availability, and
absolutely
still turned up and had a real dig. They were in that game for an hour.
Yeah, they were, mate. They were, and look, and that's a credit to that team. I mean, Fui Moimoi, I think he's almost 40 years of age and had to play the full 80 at front row, that's no mean feat. But yeah, look, it was a step too far for them. I called it. I thought that Workington were going to, they were going to go to Hunslet and cause an upset there and progress to the next stage of the playoff campaign. But I did feel they were going to come unstuck there at Newcastle. Obviously, things didn't help when they were only able to take 14 players. So for our viewers, obviously 13 are playing on the pitch and you get 4 substitutes on the bench, and they only had 1 sub. So that was always going to be a telling factor. It was always going to be hard enough anyway for them travelling away to Newcastle, who were a good side, but to go there under strength was always going to make it even more difficult. But the fact that the scoreline was 38-18, they competed. They weren't embarrassed. I mean, they could take a lot of heart from that. It was just disappointing that they had a lot of injuries and obviously player unavailability due to work commitments, which impacted on on them only being able to field 14 on the day. So, I mean, certainly they can hold their heads high. The guys that took the field that day, they certainly didn't let their club or their fans or their teammates down. But obviously, Chris Thorman he want to make sure he's got enough players next year that this doesn't happen again. And he's been rewarded with a 3-year contract at the club, so I'm sure he'll get on top of that for next season.
And Newcastle Doncaster, for the other grand final spot of the weekend, is one of the key areas in this one, the battle in the halves. Because we look at the talent that they've got. Yeah. Actually, been really impressed by that QLT's moved kind of almost seamlessly from a fullback, and he looks good in the halves. Yes,
well, he's done a job, and he actually, it's funny, when he made his debut for Castleford, it was actually against us at Warrington, and he played in the halves that day because they had quite a lot of injuries, Castleford, and he stood out that day. He caused us a lot of problems. So he's not unaccustomed to playing in the halves. I think even before I played with him at Sheffield, he was playing in the halves at South Logan Magpies in the Q Cup. So he's been there before, so it's not an unfamiliar role to him. But yeah, look, obviously that's where Simon Finnegan feels his best position is for the team, and that's, knowing QLT as I do, he'll be happy to do whatever he has to do for the team. So, but again, you're right. I think there's 2 exciting teams. There's some great players in both sides going to be meeting each other this weekend. And you spoke about the halves there, QLT and Nick Newman, I think, has been a great signing for Newcastle from Coventry. I think, he was a big part of probably why Coventry had a good start to the season. Newcastle clearly identified that and thought, hang on, we need him. Once Liam Finn had obviously left the club, it was, we need to go get this kid. He's got something. So he's definitely added a different dimension to their game. And then you look at Rangi Chase and obviously Matty Baharrel, who are 2 very experienced campaigners. Matty's obviously very experienced at League One and Championship, and Rangi obviously being a former international player. So both both sets of halves excite you there. But then you look on the edges and the flanks, I think Thunder have got some great outside backs, that can cause some problems there. But then so have Doncaster. And both teams like to play rugby league football too. They like to play ball. They'll challenge each other. I think it's going to be a great game. And I went in Doncaster's favour a couple of weeks ago. They met in the league. Doncaster went to Newcastle and beat them 20 points to 6. But I think this time round it's going to be a Newcastle win.
And obviously a part of the world that you know a bit about, having played up at Gateshead.
I played a season there.
What do you feel like there's the potential there for that Newcastle club to really grow and become
Absolutely.
a powerhouse?
Absolutely. And I'll be honest with you, when I left Castleford at the time and joined Gateshead, what I was excited about at the time was the fact that they were just starting to get their junior stuff up and running, and they were very much in the infancy of trying to develop themselves as a club. And it was sold to me as a 6-year plan of getting to Super League, and I just saw that as an exciting project as a player that then potentially could be coming towards the back end of my career, and then transition into a coaching role there, and obviously help develop a team outside the heartland to be a force. And unfortunately, the year I was there, the club went into administration, so obviously a lot of us players had to then leave the club and move on, and had a couple of tough years did Newcastle Lewis, what was still known as Gateshead then. But since they formed this partnership with the Rugby Union Club, I certainly feel they're in better hands now. I think they've got a great CEO there now. They've got a great owner as well who's got his full backing of it. I think the youth teams that are there now, the 16s and the 19s, they're not just competing with Super League clubs, they're now beating them. So that's a credit to all the staff that have gone there during that tenure previously and who are still there now, those local people that have stuck with the club and helped develop those kids. There's hats off to those guys, and they're obviously doing a lot of things right up there. And I think the facility's a great facility at Kingston Park. I think they've, after being at the awards night last night, it was pretty clear that they don't see a difference between the league or the union. It's very much a partnership that's together, and it's about promoting rugby. We just want kids with rugby balls in hands, and if they come down the league path, great. If they go down the union path, great. We just want to engage kids and get people playing it and excited about rugby in Newcastle, whether that's rugby league or rugby union. So I think that joined up approach has really worked for them, and I think there's a real exciting future there at Newcastle. I'm a big believer in that project. I was a believer in it before when I played, and I think now it's that reality's starting to come to fruition, and I think they're doing it at the right pace as well. They're not getting ahead of themselves, they're not rushing things. They've made sure they've just kept building that youth structure and all that. They've kept building the team here in League One. I mean, this is the first time they've been in the playoffs since they gained promotion in 2008. So, it's new territory again for this group of players. And I'm not sure they're ready to go up this year. I think next year is going to be the year for Newcastle. Like I said, I tip Newcastle to beat Doncaster this week, but I think Oldham will gain promotion. But I think another year for Newcastle. It gives Coach Finnegan a full pre-season with them. He can recruit a little bit more of what he feels he needs to build that team ready for the championship. They've got Dennis Betts now there as a director of rugby too, who's going to be giving his experience and guidance to the organisation. So I just think they've got some really good things in place there, and I think in 12 months' time you'll see Newcastle gain promotion, and then I think we'll grow in the championship as well. And
that game available to watch on the OuRLeague app and the Betfred Facebook page, and you've obviously been, as we've said, quite heavily involved in the OuRLeague coverage throughout the year. There's more rugby league available to watch than there ever has been on these new platforms, and I mean, it must be as a rugby league person, it must be a real satisfying thing to be part of and just enjoy, particularly League One and Championship, which hasn't always been as exposed as it currently is.
No, absolutely. I know the Championship has had coverage in the past with Sky and Premier Sports covered it previously, but like you said, it's not probably in recent years hasn't had the coverage it deserves. So I'm really pleased that the RFL have got on board alongside you guys here with Betfred, to truly try and give it the platform and the opportunity to get out there, and I think it's been great. I think it's had some great feedback, and the fact that there's obviously other ideas around content too as well, and there's some exciting ideas to come ahead for next year too. So for all the viewers that will stick on with it, there's going to be some different things we're looking to try and do next year to try and help keep growing the app itself and just the different content we can share out there. So albeit we want to keep streaming the games and getting that platform there, but we also want to get some other content to engage engage with new fans as well and new people into the game. And so there's some good ideas that are coming to the table on that front. But for me personally, it's been great to for these clubs and these teams to get that exposure and get themselves out there and get the coverage, which can only help for me in terms of their growth as clubs and as teams. So it's great.
No, we're in for another really big weekend, I think. Another, it's going to be a fantastic running to the end of the season. Hendo, massive thank you for joining us.
No worries, Lewis. Anytime,
on the
mate.
show. That's all we've got time for on this episode of the In Touch Show. We'll be back next week. It's going to be a Man of Steel special next week as we have a look at the biggest individual award in the game. So please do join us then, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. That's all for now.